There's a saying in transportation that goes organization before electronics before concrete. The idea is that if you want to improve a transportation system, it's best to see if you can first change how it's run, then if you can improve its technology, and only then if it makes sense to build. This is because of these three approaches, organization will tend to be the fastest and the cheapest, and concrete the slowest and most expensive, not to mention the most prone to over-optimism. But concrete can be the most tempting. It's big, it's visible, it's dramatic, it feels permanent, it feels like it opens up more doors in some imagined future. It means putting a lot of people to work. It means some people get the power to decide who does that work. Organization means changing how things are done. It means upsetting the status quo. It may mean adding or cutting personnel. Whether it's because of ignorance, inertia, or malice, many organizations decide to go right to concrete, and the public is left waiting and paying for the concrete to be laid and bring them to that transportation nirvana. This is the story of a concrete solution, and how organization can not only save us from that solution, but also make things better than when we even started. Amtrak has a big problem. The tunnels carrying its and New Jersey Transit's trains in and out of New York Penn Station are over a century old, and they believe they are in need of imminent repairs. These tunnels carry hundreds of regional and commuter trains a day from New Jersey to the core of Manhattan. And according to Amtrak, the only way to give them the repairs they need is to close each down one at a time, for a period of about 2 years each. During that time, trains would have access only to one of the tracks, dramatically reducing capacity and disrupting the commutes of tens of thousands of people. Manhattan is home to the highest concentration of jobs in the United States, and in 2017, over 2 million people commuted in each weekday. About 350,000 of those commuters came from New Jersey, so the economy of both places is heavily impacted by people's ability to travel between them. With the Hudson River lying in the middle, New Jersey commuters are dependent on a series of bridges and tunnels, some of which carry highway traffic, some the subway-like PATH train, and 2 of which carry commuter and regional trains into Penn Station. Pre-pandemic, these 2 tunnels carried about a quarter of those 350,000 commuters. Penn Station lies in Midtown West, one of the busiest parts of this busy borough, and it offers transit connections to destinations throughout Manhattan and beyond. Any disruptions to its operations would have significant impacts on people's ability to get around, so people are looking for a solution. Amtrak's solution is as big as the problem itself, a $16 billion project to construct 2 entirely new tunnels under the Hudson River to carry trains while the old tunnels are repaired, estimated for completion in 2040. First introduced in 2011 following the demise of a similar project called Access to the Region's Core, or ARC, the Hudson Tunnel Project is part of a larger set of projects called the Gateway Program. The Gateway Program also includes replacing old bridges in New Jersey and adding new tracks, as well as creating a track loop in Secaucus that would allow more NJ Transit trains to run directly to Manhattan. It would also involve expanding Penn Station to accommodate additional trains. The Hudson Tunnel Project would let Amtrak close down the old tunnels for repairs without reducing capacity, but on its own, it wouldn't add any capacity. To do that, you need the other projects in New Jersey and the Penn Station expansion, which would cost additional billions of dollars. The Regional Plan Association, or RPA, a nonprofit that's been working closely with Amtrak, released a report in 2019 painting a bleak outlook should the new tunnels not be built. It says that during single tunnel operations, maximum inbound capacity would be reduced from 24 trains per hour to 6. According to their numbers, there'd only be room for about 4 in every 10 NJ Transit commuters in the morning rush, leaving about 38,000 people to find other ways to get to Manhattan. They also claim that Amtrak's daily ridership between New York and DC would drop by about a third, or 8,000 people. This, they believe, is unacceptable. People who still ride to Manhattan would face increased crowding and less reliable service. Everyone else would have to find other ways to get around, which they say would increase stress on everything from highways to the PATH train to buses to airlines. The report, whose funders included Amtrak, New Jersey Transit, and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, estimates the total health, safety, and travel costs at about $16 billion. If they released any data to back this up, I could not find it. And that number is eerily commensurate with the $16 billion cost of the Hudson Tunnel Project, which includes $14 billion to build the new tunnels and $2 billion to repair the old ones. $14 billion is a hard number to wrap your head around. It may sound reasonable given the scope of the problem and the number of people affected, but bringing it down to a human scale does not inspire confidence. So the RPA says that single tunnel operations would mean that 46,000 people would have to find another way into Manhattan on weekdays. Note that all of these people are commuting at rush hour. Ridership during the rest of the day is so low that even a single tunnel could accommodate all of the traffic. 46,000 people per weekday comes out to about 92 million rides disrupted over 4 years. Divide 14 billion by 92 million and you come out to a cost of about $153 per ride. That is, Amtrak, the federal government, the Port Authority, and the state governments of New York and New Jersey would be collectively shelling out $153 every time they save someone the trouble of having to use another mode of transportation to get to Manhattan. Switching to a bus or the PATH train may be inconvenient, but imagine most commuters would happily accept far less than $153 for their trouble. What's worse is that the RPA ran its numbers before the pandemic. With current ridership, the disruption is more like 25,000 rides disrupted each morning, which comes out to $280 per ride. That's $131,000 per year for a 9-to-5 commuter, or $525,000 over the 4-year duration of repairs. In other words, Gateway's funders could more cheaply buy every 9-to-5 commuter a new house than to build these tunnels. And no one would be stuck west of the river. Amtrak never runs more than 6 trains per hour in these tunnels in either direction, which it does around midday, so all of its trains could fit through the remaining open tunnel. NJ Transit riders would have multiple options. First, there's the PATH train, a subway-like service running from New Jersey to Manhattan via 2 different lines, each with their own tunnels. Recent and coming improvements are giving the PATH capacity for about 35,000 extra riders in the morning peak, and its morning peak ridership is still down 26,000 people compared to pre-pandemic, which means an excess capacity of over 61,000 people, more than enough to accommodate the displaced NJ Transit riders. Moreover, there are about 20,000 fewer bus riders crossing the Hudson in the morning compared to pre-pandemic. Ferry ridership numbers are hard to come by, but it's likely they have spare room as well. A commuter from Trenton, New Jersey currently has to pay about $19.25 for a one-way peak fare to Penn Station. They could be offered a fare of, say, $2 if they instead get off in New Jersey. If they were to transfer to the PATH, their journey to Midtown Manhattan would take about 21 minutes longer, but cost a total of just $5. It'd be $6 if they switched to a bus. Some people might choose to pay the full fare for a one-seat rush-hour ride to Manhattan, but plenty would be happy to switch. The added $17 subsidy on their trip is high, but it's nothing compared to $280. And it leaves loads of money left over for things like improving these other transit services and offering commuters tax breaks. Of course, closing a tunnel without a replacement would impact the resiliency of cross-Hudson travel. That is, if there's an issue with the remaining rail tunnel, the PATH train, or bus service, there's less slack available on these other modes. There's some truth to this, but given how many other options there are, buses running in 2 sets of tunnels, PATH trains running in 2 sets of tunnels, and the number of ferries, an issue on any one of these doesn't have to be that much more disruptive than it is today, especially if you increase service on the others. The RPA's analysis specifically ignores the possibility of increasing service on any other mode of transit, claiming that it's just too hard to predict how thorough these improvements would be in practice. But shouldn't a regional planning organization offer proposals for these improvements? And why would any of them be harder than building a brand new pair of underwater tunnels? In reality, they'd be a lot cheaper, faster, and reliable than the 10-plus year, $14 billion megaproject. Ignoring these solutions when deciding whether to build is like ignoring the existence of medicine when deciding whether to do surgery. It's also worth noting that a study released by engineering firm London Bridge Associates in 2020 argued that it might be possible to repair the existing tunnels on nights and weekends rather than entirely shutting them down. If this is the case, Amtrak and NJ Transit riders wouldn't have to change their travel patterns at all. Amtrak has claimed that such an approach isn't feasible given the nature of the repairs needed. I don't have the expertise to say which side is right, but even if Amtrak is, it's clear that there are much better alternatives to building new tunnels. And of course, these new tunnels wouldn't increase train capacity one bit. Though you'd eventually have 4 tunnels in operation, there'd be no more room for trains at Penn Station. Amtrak's solution is to make room. Its $16 billion project, called Penn Station South, would demolish an entire city block and parts of 2 others in order to expand the existing Penn Station. This cost estimate comes before even a preliminary design is complete, and I cannot even find any estimate of how long it would take. Moreover, ridership to Penn Station is currently well below capacity, and no one has any idea when it might surpass pre-pandemic levels, much less when it might necessitate anywhere close to twice as many rush-hour trains under the Hudson. In other words, it's unclear whether this $16 billion annex would ever be necessary. And New York Governor Kathy Hochul recently came out in opposition to the plan, upping the political difficulty of even making it happen and casting further doubt on the value of new Hudson River tunnels, which are currently in the early stages of construction. In response to Amtrak's plan, two nonprofits have proposed alternatives, both of which would rework the station to allow more trains to through run. That is, to continue straight through Penn Station and on to stations beyond Manhattan, rather than turning around at Penn. Penn Station was originally designed for through running, and Amtrak's trains do it every day. It's just a matter of making it so that more of NJ Transit's and the Long Island Railroad's trains can do the same thing. One proposal is claimed to cost just under $7 billion, the other about $10 billion. Amtrak dismissed both of them, saying they wouldn't provide enough capacity, but their critics argued that Amtrak's report was full of errors, omissions, and unfair assumptions. It's hard to say how realistic either of these estimates are, but then again, there's no reason to believe that they're less realistic than Amtrak's. After all, Amtrak's Moynihan Train Hall project, which expanded Penn Station into the old post office building across the street, nearly tripled from its original price tag, eventually costing $1.6 billion. Then there's East Side Access, which brought the Long Island Railroad to a new terminal beneath Grand Central, and it's about the most comparable project we have to the Penn Station expansion. It opened 14 years late and cost over 2.5 times its original budget. And Amtrak's $14 billion construction proposal comes at a time when the Northeast Corridor is facing a $44 billion maintenance backlog, including $3.8 billion needed just to replace the ancient electrical wiring that's been regularly shutting down service into Penn Station, including at least 10 separate incidents in a 2-month span in 2024. Amtrak itself has acknowledged that preventative maintenance on these wires is often foregone due to the need to focus on other projects, and it has no plans to fix them. Expanding now is like building an addition to a house that's on fire. While the cost of reducing service in the Penn Station down to one tunnel is high, the cost of actually building new tunnels is astronomical. And folks across the region and across the country would end up footing the bill. The federal government would pick up nearly 3/4, the rest coming from New Jersey, New York State, and the Port Authority. It's wrong to ask millions of people to pay $280 per ride to ease the commute of about 25,000 daily riders, many of whom would happily accept incentives to switch to other modes. The new tunnels would be redundant. They'd take over a decade to construct. They wouldn't even increase capacity unless an entirely separate megaproject were completed. And that capacity may never be needed. There are so many alternative ways to travel and ample resources to encourage people to use them. There are so many repair projects that really need this money. This project simply isn't worth it. It's a boondoggle waiting to happen. And yet, there's this way in which it feels wrong not to do it. To accept that accommodating a disruption is better than building something new. To accept that the rail ridership on NJ Transit and Amtrak just isn't high enough to require this kind of investment. Or to spend 4 years with fewer open tunnels to Penn Station than there were a century ago. As wasteful as this project would be, it feels a bit deflating not to do it. To do 4 years of work just to go from having today's transit to having less transit and then back to today's. Fiscal prudence does not make the heart sing. Maintenance does not make the heart sing. New transit, that's what dreams are made of. And here's the thing, we can have it all. We can solve more problems than Amtrak even hopes to. And it's so easy, because the real solution is not concrete, it's organization. The key to improving transit across the Hudson is to look at what's already there. Because the big secret is that there are already tunnels right next to the ones that Amtrak wants to repair. And each of these tunnels has twice as much spare capacity as Amtrak could create through the Gateway program. And they go by one name, the Lincoln Tunnel. The Lincoln Tunnel doesn't immediately jump out as a solution to Amtrak's woes. It's a highway tunnel, not a rail tunnel, and most of the time, it looks like it has anything but spare capacity. But that's a product of how it's used, not what it is. Because while the Lincoln Tunnel today is primarily a conduit for cars, it absolutely doesn't have to be. Simply by prioritizing bus traffic, you can solve more problems than Amtrak could even hope to solve, and in a fraction of the time. We know this because the existing bus lane, though it exists for just 4 hours a day and in one direction, is the most productive transit line in the entire New York metropolitan region. The Lincoln Tunnel Exclusive Bus Lane, or XBL, takes over 2.6 miles of what is usually an outbound general traffic lane and carries up to 650 buses per hour, or about one bus every 5.5 seconds. That allows it to carry more people per hour than any subway or commuter train in the entire region. And here's the math to prove it. The Lincoln Tunnel today carries a mix of coach buses and transit buses, and it is capable of carrying double-decker and articulated buses too. So it has a lot of potential for growth without the need for any concrete. And these numbers aren't just theoretical. Pre-pandemic, buses in the Lincoln Tunnel exclusive bus lane carried 72,000 daily passengers during the morning rush, compared to 62,000 on NJ Transit and Amtrak trains. The Lincoln Tunnel overall carried 110,000 bus passengers in that time, meaning that many people took buses that spilled over into the other lanes. Overall daily bus traffic to the Manhattan core was over twice that of NJ Transit's trains in 2017. And that gap has only grown as these buses have seen stronger ridership recovery post-pandemic. Dollar for dollar, year by year, passenger by passenger, better buses can do so much more than a new train line. And yet, they rarely receive the same fanfare or the same support. Part of the issue is that most people in New York and New Jersey rarely experience a bus that's anything but slow and unreliable, even compared to the region's trains. Those trains run so much better not because they're trains, but because they don't get stuck behind cars, and they run on dedicated rights of way with high speed limits and no traffic lights to wait at. There's also the fact that many people, even those who often ride trains, see buses as a second-class mode of transportation. Some folks might favor a slower, less convenient rail line simply because it doesn't have the same stigma. And of course, lots of people just think trains are cool. They like the idea of them, they like the aesthetic, they like the engineering marvel of it all. And while some people had the same feelings towards buses, they're firmly in the minority. The best way to combat these attitudes is to show people what good bus service looks like, and the Lincoln Tunnel is a great place to start. Because buses don't just offer more capacity than trains, they can also reach more people, run more often, and offer greater choice. In the map on the left, you can see that just 5 commuter rail lines converge onto the tracks into Penn Station, while dozens of NJ Transit bus routes feed into the Lincoln Tunnel. And they're joined by buses from over 100 different private operators. The solution is to go from having 1 part-time exclusive bus lane in the Lincoln Tunnel to 4 full-time bus priority lanes, 2 inbound and 2 outbound. In bus priority lanes, buses, together with their smaller cousins known as dollar vans, could at any time travel for a low, fixed rate, and any spare space could be sold off to cars and trucks using demand-responsive tolls. That is, the toll for cars and trucks would be set just high enough to discourage them from overloading these lanes and causing traffic congestion. This system allows for these lanes to be fully utilized even when demand for buses is low, and it gives drivers a choice whether to pay for faster travel or stick to the other 2 lanes, which would maintain the tolls they have today. Any toll revenue above what's collected now could be divvied up to local governments based on their share of travelers, with a portion also going to the city of New York, earmarked for use in Midtown. The money could go towards things like tax credits, stipends, transit, or public amenities. With 2 bus priority lanes in and out of Manhattan, there'd be enough capacity for 6-minute headways on up to 130 bus routes. By comparison, the entire subway network comprises 28 services, including the shuttles. Many people would have a choice between multiple bus lines and multiple operators, which is key to maintaining reliability and responsiveness. If NJ Transit cancels your train, you might be stuck for an hour. If they were to cancel your bus, you might only be stuck for a few minutes. And you might not be stuck with NJ Transit at all. You might just switch to a private company. Not only could the Lincoln Tunnel itself have bus priority lanes, but so could the connecting highways in New Jersey and the connecting streets in Manhattan. At the least, bus priority lanes could span the entire eastern spur of I-95, which stretches north near a junction with I-80 and the George Washington Bridge, and south to I-78 and Newark International Airport, as well as part of New Jersey State Route 3 up to where it reaches the Meadowlands Sports Complex. That'd total nearly 17 miles compared to the 2.5 miles that buses currently get. Coupled with bus priority within Newark Airport, these lanes could ensure 25-minute rides from the airport to Midtown Manhattan all day, every day. Buses could also pick up train passengers at major hubs, shuttling them from York Penn Station to Midtown in about 20 minutes, or from Secaucus Junction to Midtown in about 10 minutes. The state of New Jersey could use the Meadowlands Sports Complex, whose MetLife Stadium is home to the New York Giants and Jets, as a massive park and ride facility. The sea of parking at this site is about 10 times the size of the stadium itself, housing over 27,000 spaces, more than enough space to park every single car that currently goes through the Lincoln Tunnel to Midtown at rush hour. This would mean that even people who don't live near a bus route would have an easy alternative to the hassle and expense of driving into Manhattan. It also put pressure on bus operators to provide good service on all of their routes, as many customers would have the ability to just drive and catch a ride from the Meadowlands. MetLife Stadium is rarely used on weekdays, and when it is, it's almost always at night, so its parking lots sit nearly empty during the 9 to 5 workday. And when there are games, the bus lanes could be a huge asset in getting people out to the stadium. In terms of attendance, becoming a 15-minute ride from Times Square might just be the next best thing to a Super Bowl victory. And of course, these lanes could extend even further. Congestion is at its worst near the Lincoln Tunnel, but it crops up just about everywhere. You could even extend them all the way from DC to Boston and really give Amtrak a run for its money. But I'm going to keep this video focused on New York and New Jersey. The other key part of the scheme would be making sure that buses have somewhere to go when they reach Manhattan. Most buses from the Lincoln Tunnel run straight to the Port Authority bus terminal, and the Port Authority bus terminal doesn't have much spare room. Pre-pandemic, it was entirely full, and that might even be the case again now. It's also a confusing, smelly, decaying, poorly designed, overcrowded mess. Its layout causes constant traffic jams, it can't handle double-decker or articulated buses, and it needs massive repairs in the coming years just to remain fully dysfunctional. Like their frenemies at Amtrak, Port Authority officials see the solution in a years-long, multi-billion-dollar project. 7 years and $10 billion, to be exact. They want to tear down the existing terminal and replace it with a larger, modernized facility. And it's what experts call a doozy. The new terminal would rise 157 feet into the air, over twice the height of the existing structure. The first 2 floors wouldn't even host any buses. They'd be reserved for offices, ticketing, and retail. The closest passengers would get dropped off to ground level would be either 2 stories up or 2 stories down. And some would have to travel all the way down from the 7th floor just to reach the street. The Port Authority wants to build an entire city block's worth of ramps just to allow buses to spiral that high. These ramps would not lead into the terminal itself, but into this massive bus parking garage, which itself would take up most of a city block. The terminal itself, built on the footprint of the existing facility, would require another 1.5 city blocks. The only other component of this project would be 2 office towers wedged in at the eastern end of the complex. In a part of New York City where housing costs are astronomically high and where scores of people are sleeping on the streets, the Port Authority plans to build exactly 0 units of housing. This is what the area looks like now, dominated by a spaghetti of ramps to the Lincoln Tunnel and Port Authority. Reconstructing the Port Authority bus terminal means a unique opportunity to restore the urban fabric of this neighborhood. Instead, they want to condemn the area to live for decades in the shadows of these massive concrete structures. A small portion of the footprint would be 2 deckovers that would one day be converted into publicly accessible open space, a term that makes you wonder why they didn't just say parks. But while the new terminal is being built, these would serve only as places for buses to park and idle. And the Port Authority doesn't even promise to open them up to the public until 2040, 8 years after construction has wrapped up. Lest we think we're living in a more enlightened time, it's worth remembering that even the most fanciful version of the Mid-Manhattan Expressway, a hugely destructive proposal by master builder and real-life supervillain Robert Moses, would have risen to a height of just 100 feet. To be sure, Moses's highway would be worse, in that it would have raised scores of buildings across the entire length of Manhattan. The Port Authority wouldn't destroy any existing structures for its plans besides the old terminal. What it would do, however, is its own kind of tragedy. It would end any hopes of really transforming this area. It would solidify in 7 stories of concrete the scars wrought by the Lincoln Tunnel's approach roads. It would ensure that the southern section of Hell's Kitchen remained fractured, an inferior substitute to the blocks north, south, and east. It wouldn't do anything to address housing affordability, taking what would be over 700,000 square feet of newly developable land, enough for tens of thousands of residents, and giving a sliver to offices, the rest reserved for buses that could easily park somewhere else. And despite all the time, all the money, and all the wasted opportunity, this project would increase bus throughput by just 35%, or 266 buses per hour. That's enough to meet the Port Authority's projected 2040 demand, but at an incredible cost to the city, the region, and the country. And its necessity rests on the same assumption as Amtrak's Gateway program, that streets for cars must stay streets for cars. Nowhere in either of these studies do they consider busways to be even part of the solution. But reserve just 2 of Manhattan's streets for buses, and you can transform the journeys of hundreds of thousands of people every day. 34th Street and 42nd Street are wide thoroughfares that run all the way across the heart of Midtown Manhattan, and both connect directly to the Lincoln Tunnel. Right now, both streets have a set of bus lanes, but they're so often blocked by cars and trucks that they barely make a difference. By making the entire streets bus only, you remove these obstacles and you give buses space to pass each other, increasing capacity and making service a lot smoother. Each spanning 2 miles, these streets have enough curbside space for twice as many buses as the Port Authority's proposed new terminal. And it'd be a lot easier for buses to get in and out, since rather than traveling up and down ramps to reach parking bays, they could just pull over to the curb. Not only would the solution be faster and cheaper, it would also do something that neither Penn Station South nor the new Port Authority bus terminal even hopes to do: get New Jersey commuters to Midtown East. Right now, everyone has to walk, bike, or switch to an MTA bus or subway train to get to that area, which is home to Grand Central, the UN, endless shopping, and one of the highest concentrations of jobs in the world. Some buses could run express to the east side, some just to the west, some to both. Bus riders could transfer directly to any subway line in Midtown and wouldn't have to spend any time figuring out what Penn Station platform they have to squeeze themselves onto. Midtown traffic speeds averaged just 5 miles per hour in the first half of 2024. At times, it's been faster to walk. But on exclusive roads, bus speeds could more than double, reaching an average speed of 11 miles per hour, including waits at stoplights. That'd mean a 10-minute trip end to end, compared to 23 minutes today. That helps out not only New Jersey commuters, but anyone trying to get across town. People don't just want to go to the area around Penn Station or the Port Authority. They want to get everywhere. New Jersey and the Port Authority are trying to solve the problem of over-centralizing by over-centralizing more. Busways disperse people to the places that they actually want to go, and they don't need any more infrastructure than paint, signs, and enforcement cameras. In a pinch, you could enlist the help of a few traffic cops and create them in a day. And through running would just be a matter of a bus operator sending its buses along through the Queens Midtown Tunnel, which is located directly across Midtown from the Lincoln Tunnel. Direct services between any number of destinations in New Jersey to the west and Queens and Long Island to the east would be possible. Whether it's someone coming from Jackson Heights catching a flight out of Newark, a Mets fan heading from Paterson, New Jersey to Citi Field, or any number of people with friends, school, or work on the other side of Manhattan, it'd be possible to catch a bus that goes directly where they're going. In fact, there's nothing stopping New York and the MTA from putting a pair of bus priority lanes in the Queens Midtown Tunnel and on the Long Island Expressway, quickly transforming transportation for millions of people east of Manhattan. And you could allow private operators to run these kinds of services, allowing them to exist even if the MTA and NJ Transit are busy squabbling over turf. And none of this is to mention the safety benefits of busways. After the city introduced a busway on a portion of 14th Street, crashes dropped by half and injuries fell by 2/3. That's 6 fewer injuries every month and a lot less to worry about for everyone crossing the street. The Port Authority and the city could also introduce regulations to rapidly increase the share of electric buses on these busways, reaching a 100% requirement in just a few years and turning 2 of the city's dirtiest streets into 2 of its cleanest. Cars would still have full access to 43 of the streets cutting across Manhattan between 14th and 59th, with just 3, 14th, 34th, and 42nd dedicated to buses. And with buses providing such a good alternative to driving, traffic on these other roads might even speed up. And this plan allows for incremental change. If buses start to outgrow the space they've been given, operators would naturally tend towards more space-efficient designs, such as articulated and double-decker buses. If it's still outgrowing the space after that, all you need to do is give buses a bit of extra space on any of those 43 other streets. Busways are a simple form of organization, a proven form of organization, and a nimble form of organization. They not only solve the problem posed by having to repair Amtrak's aging tunnels, they create an entirely new level of transit access for people in New Jersey and Manhattan. And in this case, better organization can work hand in hand with better technology to turn this idea from transformative to revolutionary. Because painting the way for the buses of today means painting the way for buses that can drive themselves. And driverless buses can completely transform transportation. Today, a driver can account for around 2/3 of the cost of running a bus. which means that transit operators only run so much service, and they tend to prefer running a few big buses rather than a lot of small ones, so that they can spread out the cost of the driver across more people. Without drivers, it's not so much more expensive to move people in small buses, and that can change everything. It'd mean that buses could operate way more frequently and in many more places, reaching people who are stranded or forced to take cars today. It also means that services could be a lot more customized so that people wouldn't have to go so far out of their way, make a lot of transfers, or sit through a lot of stops. Since computers can react faster than humans, driverless buses can also travel closer together, allowing you to carry more people in less space. With a good scheme of road pricing, bus size would naturally meet bus demand, to the point that the line between a bus and a shared taxi would blur. We wouldn't even need trains anymore. Electric buses could take their place, providing all the benefits I mentioned above and uniting what are now separate road and rail networks into one system. This innovation could revolutionize how we get around, and I talk all about it in my video, Transportation as It Could Be, which is linked in the description. But choosing a bus priority policy now will not only set up the region for an autonomous future, it will also succeed entirely on its own terms, regardless of if or when driverless technology is ready for prime time. Choosing concrete and choosing trains means cementing transportation as it has been, with all the flaws that come with it. Choosing organization allows for transformation both today and in the future. The Port Authority bus terminal ought to be replaced, not with 3 massive structures of high-flying buses, but just a single modest terminal with retail wrapped around it and thousands of apartments on top and around. Parts of Penn Station have already seen a facelift, and across the street, Moynihan Train Hall provides passengers even more space and amenities. It could use some more improvements, but it's not worth the billions necessary to expand it or adapt it for more through running. Not when there's such a better solution just waiting to become reality. New York and New Jersey have all the concrete they need. What they need now is organization. What they don't need is tunnel vision.